We have been trying to solve traffic congestion for decades to no avail, whether it be tunnels, interchanges, toll roads, or HOV lanes. If you're in a place lucky enough to have commuter rail, a bike highway, or robust public transit, you can skip the gridlock. But one less car on the road doesn't fix congestion itself.
There will always be people, including most of you watching this, who will still drive places, especially if it's convenient.
What if there's no way to solve congestion? And is that a bad thing?
For the second year in a row, Chicago has the title.
Boston the dubious distinction of having the worst traffic in the country.
Toronto has one of the worst commutes.
Has the city among some of the worst
traffic in the world.
Lots of people assume that the cause of congestion is simple and obvious. There are just too many cars on the road, and there's not enough road space to fit them all. That's why I'm here, stuck behind everybody else in traffic.
If the problem simply boils down to too many cars and not enough capacity, the solution is that we either widen the roads and make room for more cars, our usual method costing us tens to hundreds of millions for a lane or two, or somehow we put a stop to all development and make all those people live somewhere else. Of course, until those people are your kids and grandkids. Neither of these are real solutions. We're not going to stop population growth or stop people from wanting to go places. And we can't keep throwing money at the problem. We're already way past the point of diminishing returns with that strategy. Recent multi-billion-dollar highway expansions in Los Angeles and Houston, for example, haven't made congestion better. They've actually continued to see it get worse in the immediate wake of these projects. So it's actually good news that the issue isn't as simple as having too much traffic, because that's a problem we have never figured out, even though we've burned a ton of money trying. It's time for a new approach.
That new approach starts with asking, what is the actual problem you're experiencing when you complain about traffic? What is it that's so frustrating? We've narrowed it down to 3 possibilities.
Explanation 1. It takes too long to get to places you need to or want to go. What does too long mean? How much time is too long? Well, the history of cities offers a pretty solid answer to this question. More than an hour round trip. This is called Marchetti's constant, and was offered up by the Italian physicist Cesare Marchetti in 1994 as a bound on city size. A city would only grow to the extent that its residents, using the prevailing transportation methods they had, could accomplish daily travel needs in about a half an hour each way. Usually, people weren't willing to spend more than that time traveling. Of course, that doesn't apply to every trip you take or every purpose, but this constant is pretty accurate in predicting the size of ancient Greek, medieval European villages, as well as modern American metropolises. This interactive map of travel distance by zip code in the US reveals a remarkably consistent pattern if you pan from major city to major city. Average commute times are rarely much under 20 minutes or over 30 minutes, so traffic might be driving us nuts, but we're not actually spending more time in it. At least not most of us. Marchetti's constant helps explain that. And it also helps explain why simply expanding roads doesn't offer any relief. If we expand roads to make room for more commuter traffic, development follows. And then after a brief period of lowered commute times, people will then be willing to live farther from work or destinations that are important to them. And builders will oblige. The incentive for vast outward expansion and more traffic as a result will continue until times go back up to where they were at. It turns out that people are willing to tolerate a pretty fixed amount of time in the car each day, so the gains from widening highways get eaten up by more traffic in what planners call induced demand. Induced demand refers to the ways that people's travel behavior compensates for whatever roadway changes we make. Anthony Downs' 1992 book, Stuck in Traffic, introduced this concept of triple convergence. If traffic crawls with 2 lanes and we double it to 4, it will temporarily make travel faster. Word will spread, and now people who commuted before and after rush hour to beat traffic will be part of it again. Drivers who have been using alternate routes will shift onto this fleetingly convenient highway. Some commuters who have been using transit would start driving. And within a short time, this triple convergence during peak hours would mean that we spent hundreds of millions of dollars for a Band-Aid. In the end, we don't enjoy shorter drives. If anything, we just travel farther to do the same stuff.
So if you have a 30-minute commute, I wouldn't anticipate it getting shorter. A certain level of congestion is inevitable.
This is another important point that people miss. Denser development doesn't mean longer travel times for people living there. In a more compact area, point A and point B are closer together, so even if travel is slower between them, it takes about the same amount of time. This was true for me in Scottsdale, Arizona, as it's true for me in Chicago. A drive to Trader Joe's takes 10 minutes in both. In Scottsdale, those 10 minutes took me 10 miles. In Chicago, it's 7/10 of a mile. Personally, I prefer the option to walk, and it's easier on my car if I do drive. Explanation 2. Travel time is either too variable or too unpredictable. It's more likely that most people's traffic woes aren't really about travel times, but are about the predictability and consistency of travel times. Travel time can vary in predictable and unpredictable ways. Predictable variability is knowing that every day at rush hour it comes to a standstill. So you can leave earlier or plan your errands around that. Unpredictable variability is way more frustrating. It's not frustrating that it takes 45 minutes to get somewhere. What's annoying is not knowing whether it will take 45 minutes or 2 hours, and you're trying to plan when you leave for the airport. Basically, it's gambling with the risk of gridlock. And unpredictable gridlock has less to do with the overall capacity of the road network. It has to do with choke points.
Have you ever noticed that some of the worst rush hour traffic is on roads with the most lanes? If it were just about having not enough road space for all the cars, this wouldn't make any sense.
To understand this, let's talk about basketball for a second.
For those of you familiar with the NBA, there's this thing called Ewing theory, which an ESPN reporter came up with to try and explain this phenomenon that the Knicks performed better when their star player, Patrick Ewing, was ejected or injured. Now, the reason for this was because when he was gone, they didn't have him to lean on, and so they stepped up, passed the ball more, other teams didn't know how to defend them. A version of this applies to traffic as well. It works like this. That giant freeway into your downtown, or that big suburban strode with all the big box stores on it, that's like Patrick Ewing. It's the superstar that we expect to carry all the weight. It's wide, it's fast, it can accommodate a lot of cars. During times of light traffic, that road is the fastest way from A to B. But at rush hour, that road becomes a congestion magnet because it's the one that everybody takes. Thousands of people, all with their own destinations, trying to drive through the same stretch of the same road at the same time. It's a bottleneck.
3. The experience of getting places you want to go to is unpleasant because of traffic conditions. So, North America has a traffic problem. But the problem isn't that our roads are full. Most of them aren't. And it's not that our commutes are too long. On average, they're about as long as they've ever been.
No, what it really is that the experience of traffic is miserable. We're spending time on gridlock roads surrounded by other equally frustrated drivers. It literally raises our heart rates. Our development pattern funnels every kind of trip onto these roads. So what do? Some of what we need to do has to do with the design of our streets, and some of it has to do with the design of our places. Let's talk about streets. Is it frustrating to move slowly? If you really think about it, I think you'll find the answer is no. What's frustrating is moving slowly in a place that should be fast.
A few weekends ago for Mother's Day, taking the highway up to my parents would have taken about an hour in standstill traffic. Taking the scenic route through the northern suburbs would have taken an hour as well. It's just that that drive looked and felt like this.
It's not the speed that's driving you nuts. It's the violation of your expectations. It's the fact that on a freeway, every single design cue is telling you to press the gas pedal, but you're playing footsie with the brake. This is counterintuitive, but the best way to make your commute more pleasant might not be to speed it up. It might be to make it so that you can have that trip on different kinds of streets, where going slow won't send you into a rage, but actually feels nice.
Unfortunately, for many of us, that's not an option. Those streets don't exist in your community, and if they do, they don't connect the places that you need to be. This is where the other design question comes into play, the design of our places, not just our streets. Our roads are a lot like rivers. Local streets flow into collectors, which merge into arterials, finally leading to highways. Similarly, a watershed consists of ditches flowing into creeks, which join larger rivers and form major tributaries. We understand that rain and snowmelt have a compounding effect in a watershed, leading to floods. To tackle this, we address the issue at the source by retaining water, prohibiting wetland filling, and managing runoff. We shouldn't be surprised by congestion because we create it deliberately. If we want less of that, we need to tackle congestion at its source. We need to keep car trips near their origin, providing local alternatives to driving, especially for people who could easily complete errands or tasks closer to home if they had options to. This includes building neighborhood businesses, promoting local jobs and housing, and investing in sidewalks and biking infrastructure. If you have commuter rail like we do here in Chicago, making that last mile easier and more convenient. It's baseball season, so I'll leave you with this. And if you aren't American, you might be horrified by some of these options. If someone lives in Joliet, Illinois, and they want to go to a baseball game on a Friday night in June, they can drive, which would take an hour and a half with 50 miles of the drive looking like this, or they could walk here. For millions of fans, a trip to Wrigley is a non-negotiable though. This is one of the coolest stadiums in the world. To avoid the traffic, lots of people make a weekend of it and they stay in this lively neighborhood. But there's also something great about Chicago. There's another option. You can take the train. What if the problem with congestion isn't that cars exist, but that we design places so terrible you can't go anywhere outside of one? What if instead of demonizing drivers when over 91% of American households have a vehicle, we created places where a trip to the game is easier, shorter, and prettier? Maybe it's time for me to take a break from sports analogies. We won't solve congestion by building more capacity, but by giving people more options to take short trips instead of long ones. So, support corner stores and other neighborhood-scale developments. Demand that your streets be safe for people walking and biking, and advocate for more housing so that those locally owned stores can be successful, bolstered by neighborhood shoppers. Talk to your local alderpeople, grab coffee with city council members, and talk about these principles. Get them on board so that when the pushback or bad plans and projections suggest highway expansion, you can have a stable base of support to advocate for a more responsible use of those millions of dollars. This can seem overwhelming when we do it from a top-down way, but change comes from the bottom up. You can build the places that you want. More on that next time.